presentation is three things. First, I'm going to talk about what we did in 2020, the very unusual year. Then I'm going to talk about what we plan to do in 2021, kind of broad overview. And then I'm going to share our fundraising goal, which is to raise $1.8 million by the end of the year, and ask you all to help us achieve that goal. So get ready for me to ask you for some financial support by the end of the call. Do not be alarmed, that is coming your way in about 40 minutes. All right, so with that, I'm going to dive in by rerouting us around why we're all on this call today. There's 71 of us on this call, and we're all here because we believe that cellular agriculture, which is the growth of animal products from cell cultures rather than whole animals, is an incredible technical solution to environmental degradation at the hand of animal agriculture, to the development of epidemic viruses and antibiotic resistance, which of course is perpetuated by the mass production of animals, and of course for the improper treatment of animals. And one thing I really love about the New Harvest community is that we are, whether we eat animals or don't eat animals, we all believe that we would prefer to eat a hamburger that was grown from cell cultures rather than from animals. And we would pick that product over a burger or a sausage or a nugget that came from an animal's body kind of 10 times out of 10. So I'm really proud of all of us for rallying together behind this important science. So 2020, here's all the awesome stuff that we did. It's impossible to talk about 2020 without talking about COVID and how it affected us. I mean, it affected everybody on the entire planet. And our approach was to try and COVID-proof our organization as quickly as possible rather than attempt to wait it out, because I don't think there is a waiting it out over any short period of time. So we took our team remote forward in mid-March when the numbers were really escalating in New York, where we were based. And we gave up our New York office and we encouraged our team to relocate kind of to wherever was comfortable for them and made the most sense for them and their families so that we could continue driving New Harvest work forward kind of comfortably. We also canceled the New Harvest conference and all in-person events, obviously. And I think we also took a kind of interesting approach here where instead of postponing our event or moving it to a digital event, we just kind of canceled it outright and asked ourselves, what would we do if we kind of had all this bandwidth and time and kind of some budget to work with that would normally go to the conference? How could we explore some kind of new options for how we would spend that time and energy in 2020? So we really saw 2020 as an opportunity for capacity building and experimentation with the team. So what do I mean by capacity building? I mean, kind of tuning up the New Harvest engine, making sure we're doing all the nice optimization of our processes, things that often kind of fall to the side when you're a small, very mobile, agile team, and a lot of experiments, things that we had talked about for a very long time that we wanted to do, but just never had a chance to do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those things and also about the routine stuff that we are very able to continue doing. So on the capacity building side, this is what our team looked like for the first half of the year. And this is what our team is going to look like by the end of the year. So we are definitely growing. I was very excited to welcome Morgan and Gabby to the team as our interns. They can give a wave. They're all here. And very importantly, we have Bitmojis, but the other important thing is that we welcomed a new executive to the team, Dr. Paige Wilcoxon, who is our COO. And I'd actually love to pass the mic over to you, Paige, to share a few thoughts about joining the team and reflections on how it's been, because I know we haven't done a proper like launch of your addition to the team just yet.
Sure, thank you, Isha. As Isha said, I'm Paige Wilcoxon, and I do have a doctorate, but it's in psychology, so not really at all related to cell ag. But I think, some of my areas of expertise are really fostering a healthy and collaborative work culture, and also hiring and managing remote teams and improving process. So I was so happy to have this role in New Harvest. And one of the things I was most surprised by, and I probably shouldn't have been surprised because I was told it existed, but was really the collaborative and positive work culture here. I think Isha and the rest of the team built a really, really healthy culture, as you can tell by, when COVID hit, the first thing was that everyone is safe and comfortable, and then can push the work forward. So I was told it existed, and it did exist, and I'm going to do my best in my role to foster that. And I also loved being able to step into this role. And one of the first things we did was dive into our strategic plan, which I know Isha is going to be discussing a bit. And that really just made me have a wonderful understanding of the organization and where we want to go in the next 5 years. So that was a really great experience for me coming on board.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paige. Back to the slides. You may notice there are a couple of jobs there that have not been filled that we are currently hiring for. So we're really excited to announce 3 additions to the team sometime in the next few weeks. We're kind of in process right now. And I do also want to thank Paige, Jeremiah, and Mira. Their little images are down below, for really leading the hiring process and doing such a wonderful job at that. Another big thing we're doing is launching a new website, which should be launched sometime in the next few weeks. This is a really big effort that Michaela has been leading for many months, perhaps years. And it's such a big project because, when the New Harvest website, when the current New Harvest website went live, it was 5 years ago, and the landscape has changed just so much in that period of time. And so we really need to reconfigure not only the kind of content on the website, but the messages that we're sharing to the world. We no longer need to lay that baseline level understanding of cellular agriculture. Instead, we need to be sharing, what New Harvest in particular has been doing to drive the field forward. So very excited for that, and keep an eye out for that launch in the next little while. These are the kind of boring things, but actually very important things that we've also been working on, which are, tuning up that engine, bringing on new donor and grant management systems that will help us scale into the future, scale our donor base and the applications that are coming through for our research funding. We also want to become a much more data-driven organization so that we can see in real time what is happening with our community and our outcomes and our interventions, and kind of be able to be flexible and respond to the data that we're receiving back in a more real-time sense. Paige, Lanto, Jeremiah, and Mira have been really important at also putting together this very key documentation that will help us grow over the next few years, which are our employee handbook, our fellowship handbook, that kind of lay down the rules of engagement for people joining our team and joining our fellowship program. And as Paige alluded to before, our strategic plan is also a really important document that we put together this year that I'm very excited to share. It is currently in a manuscript drafty form, but I will, and I've shared it probably with several of you on the call already, but I'm excited to share that at some later date. Maybe we can do another engagement like this if it works. So experiments. So I just talked about the capacity building stuff. These experiments are things that we did with the time that we had since we canceled the New Harvest conference. One question we asked was, what role could Canada play in advancing cellular agriculture? And the immediate impetus of thinking about Canada is that I'm Canadian and I relocated to Canada in reaction to COVID. But the other side of it is, the week that I came back to Canada, 1 million Canadians repatriated that very same week. So that's a pretty interesting little data point. Another interesting data point is Canada's a lot different now than it was 10 years ago when I left. And I've been learning a lot about how Canada offers one of the most favorable R&D environments of the OECD countries. And so when I think about our cell ag industry moving towards building out R&D facilities, hiring a lot more people, doing a lot more scale up work, Canada could be a really wonderful environment for that kind of small to medium business engaging in R&D, because we have this awesome R&D credit program that allows research to essentially be free. So that's one side. Another interesting side is that a lot of the supply chains for the alt protein space start here. I learned the other day that Oatly is made from Canadian oats and Canadian canola oil. Just and Beyond Meat also source some of their pea protein from up here. So if you're a company getting to the point where you need to buy a train of something that was grown, you might buy that train of something that was grown in Canada. So that combined with the R&D environment makes it a really interesting place for industry. And last but not least, because my hometown is Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, I think it's the coldest place on earth. I can finally leverage some of my own personal connections and like my alma mater and all those kinds of things, which is kind of nice. So we incorporated here in Canada in mid-September. I don't have a lot more kind of clearer stuff to say about Canada other than to keep an eye on this. And if you're a company interested in this space, to get in touch. I'd love to share a little bit more about what I've learned. Our next experiment was based around this research question of how can we drive this feeling of connectedness and community when we don't have the conference. And so Michaela and Mira did this awesome job of putting together a project to ship masks around the world that were designed with New Harvest and cultured meat and the work that we do in mind. They shipped 450 masks all around the world and generated a lot of awesome social media content around that. And furthermore, of all the masks that were purchased, 78% of mask purchasers were first-time donors. So it was a really successful initiative for kind of deepening the engagement of our current kind of supporter base. I could say more about this mask project, but Michaela really said it best in this talk with CMS. I love it because she talks about all the design decisions that went into how the mask came together and how she handmade this like muscle cell pattern. And it's also a really great way to see how ideas come to life within New Harvest, which is something that's actually kind of hard to convey in the types of presentations that I give. So check that out. Michaela did an awesome job. And Michaela, I encourage you to give a wave because you did a really great work on that.
Can I introduce Isha?
Yes, please.
I just want to remind people that you can ask questions on Slido, but also we have a poll open right now about merch ideas because the masks was a unexpected, like huge success. And we're very curious what other kinds of merch you might or might not be interested in. So you can tell us on Slido.
Awesome. Thank you, Mira. And I am enjoying seeing various merch ideas populating on Slido. In the meanwhile, you may see some familiar faces covered in this photo. This was a really awesome way for us to just get that sense of community amongst all the people that support New Harvest all over the world. I'm sure there are many people on the call who have these masks and are in this photo. The next thing is another big part of our conference is highlighting the work that our fellows do. And we are wondering, how do we highlight our fellows without having that kind of stage for them to share their research on? And so Mira worked with the wonderful team at the Cultured Meat and Future Food podcast, AKA the team at CMS, AKA Alex Shirazi, who is here, I believe, and can give a wave, and Anita and Cyrus, to do a dedicated fellowship podcast series with all of our research fellows. Hi, Alex. So these are just some of the podcasts that have gone live. I think there are going to be several more that come in the next few months. And this is a really great way to get the kind of in-depth knowledge on what's going on in the labs of the research fellows. And Mira led that, and she did a wonderful job representing the fellows in that. Here's another thing Mira has led along with her intern Morgan. We got on TikTok this year. I personally thought I was too old for TikTok, but Mira convinced me otherwise. Mira was really driven by this idea that Gen Z are the future consumers of cell ag, and it was really important to engage this generation in the work that we were doing. So she put together with Morgan our account, and our third video went viral. We got 427,000 views on Jordan Jones, our fellow's video of spinach leaf decellularizing. And what I think sold me on TikTok was the level of engagement that I saw. We got tons of comments, but the comments were things like, does anyone have research articles in a scientific journal that I can read about? And people were like sharing the PI that works with Jordan, even though I don't think we mentioned that anywhere. And furthermore, all these comments are by people who are not New Harvest people. So there was really deep engagement, which I guess I just didn't expect to see on TikTok. We also had people suggesting what kind of scaffolding materials we could use, which I thought was very cool. Also, we got a ton of views redirected from TikTok back to Jordan's podcast on the slide earlier, and several people reposted the TikTok video on TikTok and on YouTube. So in all, we got kind of millions of people looking at this decellularized leaf and thinking about cellular agriculture, which is a huge win. And, I was just kind of blown away because I had given up Instagram and was not ready to jump onto a new thing yet. So thank you, Amira and Morgan, for that. The last experiment I'm going to talk about is probably our biggest one, which is a safety initiative that we worked on with Joanne Shatkin and Kim Ong. I definitely saw Kim somewhere on the call, so she can give a wave wherever she is. I can't see her right now. We're also, oh, hi, Kim. And Joanne and Kim are safety experts who approached me last year with this idea that we really need to push the conversation forward when it comes to the safety of cultured meat. It is such an obvious pre-competitive issue that affects all the companies, but for whom the companies themselves can't necessarily drive forward by themselves. And I shared this image of the kind of funding gaps in biotech versus cellular agriculture to drive the point home that there's a lot of private funding in cellular agriculture for companies, and that's why we have so many companies saying they're going to put products on the market in the next 5 years or so, or within the next 5 years. But because there is such a lack of public funding, we don't really have great public resources that regulators or consumers can look at to understand if cultured meat is safe. And so with Joanne and Kim, and also Gunnar, Alan Gunn here, and the New Harvest team, we have been working on a very landmark publication that describes the process of manufacturing cultured meat and identifies the safety issues and or hazards associated with that manufacturing process. And it sounds easier than it is. What makes it hard is we want to make sure that our description of the process is actually relevant for companies, which means to some degree, we need companies to be able to share a little bit about how they are manufacturing cultured meat within the bounds of their own private company. And I have to say that I'm really impressed that we've been working with 44 cultured meat companies all executives at big cultured meat companies around the world who have been sharing very key insights at a series of workshops and a series of kind of documents and one-on-one conversations that go into the manufacturing process of cultured meat and identify safety concerns that they have going forward. And what we aim to do is put out a publication that will be basically the publication that guides how regulators think about the safety of cultured meat. So it's very important, and I can't really speak to the importance of this enough. And in some ways, I'm kind of happy that the conference was canceled this year because this was such an important thing to do at this point in time specifically. Just to point out, of the companies participating so far, we have 44. Last I checked, there's about 84 cellular agriculture companies around the world. So we are still open to having some companies join in the process now. So if there's anyone here on the call that wants to get involved with this, shoot an email over to me. Another cool thing about the safety thing is that I've never fundraised for like a specific thing before. And so we were able to bring in $142,000 to support the safety initiative from 4 donors. And 3 of those 4 donors were first-time donors. And I'm really excited to share that one of those donors was a celebrity, one of the first celebrities in the cell ag space, who actually joined us at one of our first workshops. I'm not going to announce who that celebrity is right now because we have to check in with their PR people and stuff like that. But Mira is going to set up a word cloud so that you can guess who the celebrity is. And of course, the people at the safety meeting here do know who the person was because they were not wearing any kind of mask during the guest appearance in our workshop, but they are, I have to say, very appropriate for the cell ag space. Moving forward, so our research programming, of course, is kind of the bread and butter of New Harvest, and Jeremiah has done an incredible job driving that forward in a very unique year where we've had a lot of changes to research. I'm not going to be able to dive too deeply into the individual projects that we onboarded this year. I think that'll come in a future communication, but I'm happy to share that we brought on 3 new research fellows, Allison, Lily, and Rick, bringing our fellowship number up to 18. And we also brought on 5 new seed grantees, Clarice, Vicky, Jake, Lisa, and Julian. For those who don't know, our seed grant program is for kind of smaller projects that are a little bit more finite, but are very important in terms of kind of providing that little bit of catalytic support to certain types of projects. And we also brought on our first dissertation awardee, Mike McClellan. Dissertation awards are for researchers who are actually at the very end of their graduate studies. They're like 1 year out and preparing their manuscripts and are kind of exploring the cell ag aspects of the research that they were doing, because most people were doing research related to kind of the medical field. Jeremiah, do you want to say did I miss anything in that brief description?
Sounds good to me, Isha.
Okay, thank you. That sounds good. All right, moving forward. So even though I shared the researchers that we just brought on this year, research is really a long-term thing. And the average fellow is with us probably at least 3 years. So it isn't really fair to look at the outcomes of research in just 1 year. We really should be looking at the past 3 years or even 5 years in terms of what we've built in the research environment. And so I'm really proud to share this network that shows all the universities that we've been working with over the years and the network that we've built across our fellowship program, our seed grant program, and also the kind of advisors and reviewers who have participated in making those programs happen. As you can see, we're pretty US based so far, but I think that makes sense because we're a US based organization, but we are very open to kind of expanding the cell ag research community all over the world. There's a lot of places around the world that have really unique scientific expertise that does not necessarily exist in certain locales. I'm thinking off the top of my head, seafood research, for example, can be found in certain places and not others. So we're going worldwide and excited for you to help us do that. It's also kind of hard to share what our research portfolio looks like in terms of priorities. We have been framing our thinking or our kind of categories of research around this very basic understanding that cellular agriculture, meat production in particular, relies on advancements in the research of cells, scaffolds, media, and bioreactors. And so one kind of depiction of our research portfolio looks at how much our projects touch each of those areas. This is a really nice diagram that Michaela put together that shows how our research portfolio kind of spans all areas of that cell, scaffold, media, bioreactor kind of paradigm. And I want to draw some attention to that other arm, which is currently safety, because I think safety research is something that will be growing into a lot more going forward because of its kind of importance to industry and its importance as a public third-party research initiative. Also, looking back, New Harvest is really focused on the idea of developing leaders and enabling leaders. And we're really proud of people coming through the New Harvest network and becoming leaders in the space. And so, so far we have seen several members of our team and community and our grantees go on to start companies. And I'm really happy to share that of the $1 billion that were invested in cellular agriculture companies as of this year, this is from Ahmed Khan's Cell Agri Investment Report, which came out just last month. I encourage you to check it out. This is a huge milestone, but I'm really happy to share that over 640 million of that billion, so more than half of that investment went to companies that had some origins or roots in New Harvest at some point in time. And of course, we're really focused on research and these are companies. And I think that those things go very much hand in hand. And I think that we've seen so much growth on the startup side of things because there's there's relatively more private investment for cellular agriculture. But what I'm super excited about this year is we were able to grow some other branches into kind of other areas of the ecosystem, which are research grants. So our grantees these are research fellows, Zach, Ted, and Kai. Their PIs recently won some very landmark grants dedicated to cellular agriculture this year. The first, Zach and Ted's PI, Dr. David Block, won a really important grant at UC Davis that is completely dedicated to creating a cultivated meat consortium at UC Davis, of course. And Kai Steinmetz, his PI, Dr. Laura Domigan, also won a really important and milestone government grant to build out a team dedicated to cellular agriculture research, except this one is in New Zealand in partnership with the Important Research Institute in Singapore. So on one hand, we have kind of these industry leaders developing, but we're also enabling some leaders on the research side, which is very important for creating that rich ecosystem that will drive cellular agriculture forward. I have some more fellowship highlights. It was very hard to pick and choose these things, so I'll just share the ones that we were able to pick. The first is I'm very proud to share that John, Natalie, and Andrew are fellows at Tufts University, put together a wonderful cellular agriculture course. They've had several visitors and downloads from people all over the world in many different countries. And I encourage you to check that out if you would like to get the rundown and the basic understanding of what cellular agriculture is from a very scientific perspective. Another awesome thing is that Ricardo, oh, by the way, I think Natalie's on the call. I feel like I saw her name in passing. So she is here. And the other thing is Ricardo, who I believe is also on the call, is going to be guest editor of a special issue of the International Journal of Molecular Sciences, focused exclusively on cellular agriculture. What I love about both of these highlights is it shows the multiplicative potential that comes from training leaders in this space. You train people and they go on to train more people and bring more people into cellular agriculture, having that kind of force function effect that is so important to us. Here's just a picture of some of our research fellows. This needs to be updated because it is not comprehensive, but because we are not all in the same room, here are some friendly faces that I miss seeing in person. All right, so I'm going to take a quick breath and check in with Mira. How are things doing on Slido before I dive into what we have planned for 2021?
They are doing well, but I think that a lot of newcomers haven't heard about the URL or the code, and they're at the bottom of the slides, but it's pretty hard to read. So do you actually want to switch over to Slido and click the button that goes to Q&A just so people can see
Yep.
how to do it? So yeah, if you're just joining us, we are, because some people have been messaging me in the Zoom, but we're taking questions for the Q&A at the end on Slido. So you can join on your phone or your laptop or tablet.
Yes, simply go to slido.com and enter the code meet the team. That's meet as in the edible kind. All right, good questions coming in. Oh, where is Isha right now? I'm in the dark, floating head. Okay, 2021. What do we have planned? So we want to put our strategic plan to work that steers us into the next 5 years. And I just want to reiterate our focus on developing leaders as our catalytic way of making change in the world. I shared our strategic plan with several people, and one of them was a person who said, why don't you put out there a big, hairy, audacious goal, which is a very numerical, measurable goal that is huge and can be scary to put out into the world because you may not achieve the goal, but is really important in terms of finding alignment across the team. And so the big, hairy, audacious goal that our team came up with is that we want to enable 100 leaders in the next 5 years, seeing how much the number of leaders that we've been enabling over the past 5 years can have a huge effect on the space. We think that this is our audacious way to make the most change in cellular agriculture. And you may ask, what does it mean to be a leader? And I think a natural way to think of a leader is someone who goes through our fellowship program and becomes kind of a technical leader. I think that's definitely correct. I think there are also leaders who can catalyze growth and change who may not come from the fellowship program exactly. And I'm kind of putting them on the spot again, but Joanne and Kim, for example, come to mind as people who have been enabled as leaders in the space who address a really neglected and important issue such as safety, but didn't necessarily have all the kind of literacy and familiarity with the cellular agriculture industry or the manufacturing process or the science or the players, and now they do. And so they're really well positioned to be real drivers of the safety conversation going forward and experts that the industry can look to guide our thinking about safety. So kind of thinking ahead, leaders means founders, PIs, technical hires, and change makers, and also these kind of other experts that really make a difference in terms of getting cellular agriculture products to market. Some more priorities. We want to continue driving forward our existing research programs. We're hiring a research operations manager to manage all of the new applications that are going to come in. We're going to be bringing on some new grantees in the new year and developing some programming for our researchers that is a little more COVID proof. Normally we would see our research fellows all together in person twice a year, but we were not able to do that this year. And so we're thinking about other ways that we can continue to engage in the absence of that opportunity. We call it the lab meet, by the way. We also want to strengthen our academic relationships. What does that mean? Well, we've learned a lot about how to do academic collaborations across different disciplines and kind of different stakeholders. And we like to kind of export that learning to the world. The safety initiative is an example of kind of a way for collaborating. I think the way that we run our fellowship program is also an interesting way to foster interdisciplinary collaboration. So exporting those processes to the world is one side of it. And another side is kind of advancing our idea of research collaboration to kind of keep up with the pace of change. So I shared those two large government grants in a previous slide. In some ways that those grants might change the game a little bit when it comes to the dynamics of research collaboration in cellular agriculture. And so trying to kind of get ahead of what does it look like to have the most impact in terms of tying together the research space and designing programs and interventions that maximize that impact is part of our thinking going forward. We also want to drive the safety initiative forward. We think of this publication kind of as the starting point of a lot of important data generation for the field. So we want to publish this important publication, but B, the publication is going to be identifying a lot of key research gaps for the field, and we'd love to actually start tackling those research gaps in the lab. So these could be questions such as, what is the presence of growth factors in meat as we know it today, which seems to be like a recurring question that people have been asking. I haven't done the research on that. Someone may have done the research on that, but definitely someone will do the research on that to kind of better guide how cellular agriculture should move forward and how cultured meat, the safety of cultured meat can be compared to the safety of meat as we know it today. Another thing from the safety initiative is our actual process for running an industry-wide initiative has been a lot of learning. Like, how do you create a venue where people can share a lot of data without signing NDAs or without it getting kind of too close to IP, but still very collaborative. And so we're also exploring other types of questions or issues that we could address with these industry-wide initiatives, and very open to hear suggestions on that. On the operations side, again, those boring but important things, we want to drive forward becoming a data-driven organization. We want to also improve our fundraising strategy, AKA development. This is like a self-reflection. I think we could do a lot more with our fundraising to be a little bit more operational around it, to create more of a strategy and a system around it. So we're aiming to hire a development manager to really drive those processes forward and be a little bit more thoughtful about what donor engagement and donor stewardship could look like. We also want to optimize our communications and media engagement. We have such awesome stories to tell about what our fellows are up to, and we just need to create like a really awesome pipeline for getting those stories out into the world and getting the most eyes on the science. This next slide are some experiments for things that we've been thinking about a lot, but haven't done so far. So one of those things are, our current research very much focuses on biological laboratory, wet lab research, but we think that there are lots of other research questions kind of outside of the lab that are neglected questions that could be really important for this space as well. These are kind of social science questions. An example of what I don't think is neglected are questions about consumer acceptance, but what I do think is neglected are questions about what does the supply chain look like? How will this affect our current supply chains? What does the transition from animal meats to cell cultured meats look like? Which countries are best suited for this kind of work? I think there's a lot of kind of interesting food policy stuff that could be addressed with research over the next few years that could inform actual policy too. And on a similar note, I think there's a lot of government support that could go into cellular agriculture that hasn't happened so far. I think the research grants that I kind of talked about earlier are one example of that, but I think there's other funding around jobs, economy, economic development and innovation, which are worth exploring. And these are kind of government support opportunities across the world's governments. Like, I think there's a lot of different places around the world that could participate in cellular agriculture at kind of any level of product development in very interesting ways. And then our last probably not our last, but the last one on this slide. Our last experiment is thinking about how can we continue to drive cellular agriculture research and leadership development in the sciences in general beyond our existing programming. And this is kind of reflecting on, our current programming is kind of focused on graduate students and a little bit of postdoc work, but we could be kind of intervening earlier than that or later than that. And I know Jeremiah has a lot of great thinking about this kind of stuff, which we can talk about at some other time. And here we are finally at the last slide with some time for Q&A. So how you can help. I think that we have had a lot of momentum over the past year, despite kind of all the unexpected things that happen, or maybe not so unexpected. I've been talking about there being a pandemic for a long time. So somewhat expected, but who knew it would happen now? And in order for us to maintain the momentum that we've had, we'd like to raise $1.8-ish million by the end of the year. And I'm really excited to share that we are only $400,000 away from meeting that goal. And that goal is a little bit higher than what we've had for a kind of end of year fundraising goal in previous years. So we are being a little bit ambitious here. But I am really happy to say that we have brought on a lot of new donors this year. We've seen a lot of our current donors give more support than they have in previous years. And so we're just putting this ask out into the atmosphere. We'd love to raise this amount by the end of the year. If you are able to make a donation live on this call, we would love that. If not, expect to hear more asks from us over the next several years as we share more about our plans going forward and our strategic plan and our research and so on. But yes, please make a donation, and even better, starting today as of 6:19 p.m. Mountain Time, November 10th, we are going to be matching all donations up to $125,000. This is thanks to a new donor named Mirek from the Promoters of RT Industries. He said he might join, but it's very early India time where he is based. So maybe he's not here, but he's really excited to help us reach our goal by matching up to $125,000. So please consider giving. We've been doing a lot of hard work with your donor dollars, and we're excited to drive this important work forward. And with that, I'm going to keep this slide. No, I'm going to go to Slido. I'm looking at Mira's face, and we can head into our Q&A section of the call with 10 minutes left. I'm so happy.
So I will highlight the questions, Isha, as you pick them so people know what you're answering.
Cool. And also, I may call upon the 7 members of the New Harvest team here with me to answer some of those questions if it's better for them.
Can you see the whole stream of questions on your phone, Isha? Because I know on your screen here, you can only see the top 3.
I will bring it up on my phone. Yes, I can.
Okay, cool. So you can pick questions from even below there, and then I'll highlight them. Use them, they appear on your screen.
Cool. I guess I'll ask the most popular one that I see here. Why isn't there more funding from medicine for serum-free media? Jeremiah, I'm going to pass the mic to you after I muse on this a little bit myself. And I think what the problem is here is kind of like, why are our current model organisms the ones that they are? I think a lot of research is based on some base level understandings, but then people were excited about answering other questions relying on those base understandings. And serum, like serum, fetal bovine serum, just works really well in cell culture. It's kind of like a magic ingredient. And I think a lot of researchers have just tried to answer all these other questions relying on this magic ingredient working. So I think it's just one of these neglected things that becomes normal, but there's kind of no reason for it to be normal. And I think there should be more funding for serum-free media from the medical field, because a lot of tissue engineering stuff is also moving towards serum-free media. But yeah, I mean, I think the state of public research funding is also just not good in general, and there's not a lot of incentives to do this research in a public forum. There's definitely private companies working on this, but the kind of level of transparency is the kind of TBD. Jeremiah, tell me if I'm wrong, please, and I'd love to hear your thoughts because this is more up your alley.
And we have 8 minutes now, or else, because I could go into a long discussion on this. I think the simplest answer is what you said, Isha. It works, and there's no real incentive to change that. When I say that, what I'm talking about is, and again, this is my speculation, my musing. So, if someone has researched this officially, then I would trust, their information over mine. But the focus of tissue engineering in medicine, as I understand, being tangential to the field, is less about scale. It's more about how do you incorporate tissue that you've made outside of an organism, so in vitro, I'd say. How do you get that to reincorporate into a living system and still, not cause any negative reactions to a patient's immune system? Is it functional physiologically? So if it's like an organ you're trying to replace, or even something as simple as skin, will it reintegrate with the native tissue around it? So those questions are much more, I'd say, important for that field. And the question of serum-free media is probably a little bit more neglected, again, because like Isha was saying, if it works, don't fix it. But that being said, I mean, from an experimental perspective, purely in terms of replicability when you're doing experiments, serum-free media would be great to have. I had a professor in college who said, I think back in the 80s or the 90s, when you were doing cell culture for your PhD, you had a bottle of serum, and that's what you used for your whole PhD, because you couldn't necessarily guarantee that it would work, because of batch-to-batch variability, if you didn't have the same kind of serum bottle. That says something about replicability of science in general, and that's a whole other topic, I suppose. But I'd say you're more or less correct, Isha. Again, it's just not necessarily the focus of that field, but it is a focus of cell ag, so we're happy to look at that.
Thanks, Jeremiah. I'm going to pick a question from Caitlin Grady. She asks, as a fundraising strategist, I'm curious about primary vehicles through which New Harvest raises funds for research, donors, foundations, venture capital, etc. So as of today, New Harvest is funded exclusively by philanthropy. So that's individual donors and also foundations. I think, and also at the conference, we do receive sponsorship from companies to run our conference. So I guess that is an exception. I think we're going to keep it that way because we really want to be an independent organization. We think our independence is very important. That being said, we are open and kind of exploring the idea of having corporate donors engage with New Harvest in a way that allows us to maintain our independence, but also receive some industry support, especially given the fact that we are doing a lot of kind of important work that relates to industry. So thank you for that question, Caitlin. I like this one. Will John, Natalie, and Andrew teach the class again? If Natalie is here, I'd love for her to answer it. Natalie is here. Getting the AirPods in. Hi, Natalie.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
Oh, no worries. It just takes a while to connect. Yes, we will be teaching the class again. So we're going to teach it in the spring at Tufts. And then we're also hoping, pending the COVID situation to teach a 2-week workshop over the summer at the Tufts sister campus in France. And we really want the course to be live and collaborative. So if people are starting their own courses and want to develop new modules, we'd happily host them on the site, give feedback, share protocols. We really want this to be a living course that can change, and we can add new information and expertise to it. So please reach out if you're interested in starting your own course. We'd love to help you get that started, or if you want more access or details about the materials we already have up there.
Thank you, Natalie. And is that available for anybody, or is it just Tufts students? Like, what is the limitations, if any, to participate?
I'll double check about the summer workshop. I know the course in the spring, I guess. Sorry. My dog, we just got a puppy. She's causing a ruckus. The course at Tufts is just open to Tufts students, and then the workshop over the summer, I think there's a little bit more flexibility. So I'll get more information about who's eligible for that one and share it with New Harvest.
Thank you, Natalie.
All the course details we have a blog post on our website that links to their course website if you want to check it out.
Thanks, Mira. I like this question. What makes a good community member in the CELAG community? What do you look for from your partners in industry, academia, and other foundations? That's a great question, because we, as a nonprofit organization, it's very important to us that we don't create kind of conflicts and that we always remain helpful to everybody in the space. And so I think a good community member is one that is happy to engage with an organization, kind of respects the boundaries of our organization, and actually sees that as a advantage. There's, from my experience in pharma, pharma is very much about nonprofits working with academia, working with for-profits. And there's just some messages that need to come from nonprofits, and some messages that need to come from for-profits, and some messages that need to come from academia, and some IP, it's that coexisting ecosystem is really important. And so I think a good community member is one that kind of keeps in touch with the organization. I personally am like a very personable person. So I usually like having like a one-on-one conversation or personal connection with people at companies or at organizations, and is excited to kind of keep up with our progress and kind of sees our progress as their progress, and sees the kind of broader community advancement as being key to individual advancement. I see we are right at time. So what I'm going to do is check in with Mira and see if there's anything very specific that you want to address in the next couple minutes. I want to respect all the time that all the many people on this phone call have put in to this evening. So I think we can go over by a little while, but if you have to pop off because it's late where you are or early where you are, or you have something else to do, thank you so much for joining us today. We really enjoyed the participation. So feel free to hop off. We'll stick around for a few more minutes to answer a few more questions. Mira, did anything rise to the top for you as something we should? Oh, actually, I'd love for you to answer the one, why do you think Jordan's video went viral?
Why did Jordan's video go viral? It went viral. I actually posted the video 2 times with 2 different audios. If your TikTok works by having trending audios. And so it was a time lapse of Jordan's decellularization. And I tried 2 audios, one of which made more sense to me and one of which was trending. It was a remix of a really popular pop song mixed with a Mamma Mia song. And I think one went viral, the one with the pop song, and the other one got a handful of views. But it's not really easy to predict, but that was my experimental method.
Very good. Very good to experiment. Thank you, Mira. Another top question is, will you fund research in any country? Yes, we would love to fund research in any country. We have found a way so far, and I think we'll continue to find ways. What has been a little bit surprising to me in this New Harvest journey is each university kind of has a different way of doing things. So the paperwork is actually not as replicatable every single time, especially because we have such a focus on openness and on supporting the fellow in particular, as opposed to the lab. And sometimes those kind of agreements are a little bit novel. But yes, we do intend to fund research everywhere. And on the openness, I do see the latest question is, have you run into challenges related to data openness / transparency throughout the field? That's a huge question that I think many people would answer in many different ways. I have a personal thing about data being as open as possible because I think it is as impactful as possible when it's open. But I also know that we exist in a world where investors in particular, I think, are really interested in seeing data being protected in companies. And, you know, from my somewhat limited bio background, I actually don't think that it's that important for IP to be that protected for companies to have a competitive edge, because biological systems, I think, can only be described to so much on paper. And I think a lot of the competitive advantage companies have is actually just hands-on familiarity with working with the biological systems that they're working with. And I'm not the only one that thinks that. I've spoken to a lot of companies who feel like if you've been working with the cell cultures longer, you're probably better at it than someone that hasn't, no matter what your kind of IP is. So that's just my 2 cents. I'd love to hear your 2 cents too, Jeremiah.
Sure. So I can't speak from personal experience because I can't say I've actually gone to someone and asked, for data sharing, but I can speak from the perspective of one of our seed grantees, Clarice, who was mentioned earlier. And she's putting together an LCA. So just for the crowd, for people who may not know what that is, it's when you take a number of assumptions about how bioprocesses go, and you try and derive some sort of conclusion from that. So an anticipatory life cycle analysis is what it's called. Specifically, or I think a lot of the ones that New Harvest has worked on are for the environmental impact. She's also looking at economic impact and a few other things. But when she would approach companies, asking if they could share data, a lot of the answers she got was, we'd love to fund you to do research, but maybe for our products, that kind of thing. And so, that's the experience I have with that sort of through her. I suppose to choose the options that are here, who knows, maybe it could be psychologically related, maybe it could be just the operations of business, and that's a very standard thing. But, I think that has been a challenge, that, to answer some of the broader questions about cell ag, as it would work as a food system and that kind of thing, is still considered, I would say, intellectual property of the companies working on it. And that's kind of been one of the challenges we have. Some of our fellows are going to be trying to work on some of that in a laboratory setting, which I'm excited about. But yeah, I think there's still that, openness versus not openness, and maintaining competitiveness. I wouldn't say disagreement, but two different sides of the coin kind of thing for biotech development.
Yeah, that reminds me, I often share that slide of biotech funding. Oh, I don't know if I should try and find it now. For kind of classic biotech, AKA pharma, versus cell ag. And I don't actually want to replicate classic biotech because there's that funding gap there. And that funding gap is the reason why tech transfer offices exist in universities around the world, is that it's really hard to figure out how do you carry that important research out of the lab and into changing the world or reaching people in a meaningful way. And so I might have to actually amend this slide now that I'm thinking of it, because classic biotech has a lot of problems. And I think one of those problems is actually not about funding and is about IP and how IP actually is carried across that gap. And I think IP is best carried across that gap if there is a person carrying it across that gap. And so the incentives need to be appropriately structured so that the researchers that develop that IP are actually kind of like the, what's the word, champions of that IP getting into the world and drive it forward. It's amazing to see like how much awesome research is developed, but because of the ways like academic structures are set up, that researcher actually does not have a lot of financial incentive to get that research out in the world. So that's why I'm really focused on this idea of enabling the leader first and the project second, because they are the person carrying the science into the world. So I have a feeling that if we keep answering questions, we could be answering them forever. So I think what we will do, for the sake of having to end this at some point in time, Mira, how about we kind of let the questions keep coming through, but let's just kind of keep the lines open. If anyone wants to actually, I'm open to experimenting with just like letting people talk on the call for the next maybe 5 minutes, just to say hi and stuff. And then we'll call it a day at around 45. What do you think?
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. Great. Hi, everybody. Neil, it's nice to see you. I saw
you
your
too as well. Thank you. And the one thing I just wanted to comment is, you know, IP is extraordinarily important and it is extraordinarily valuable. I know I come at this from a very different viewpoint of pure commercial aspect, but there are ways to protect IP as well as allow for free sharing of information, free sharing of data, research offshoots to help scientists who don't have big budgets. There is, so I will definitely follow up with you afterwards, but it's a wonderful, wonderful event. Thank you.
Okay, yes, Neil, I'd love to hear about it. It's very complex, and I agree. There's a time and a place and incentives and blah, blah, blah that needs to be aligned. Thank you. Oh, I also wanted to point out, Mira shared with me that we have been receiving donations during the call. So that is a great big success. So thank you to all of you here who've donated. You know who you are. I would love to name you by name, but we didn't ask if we could. So if you want to say that you donated, feel free. But yes, thank you very much.
And we do accept Bitcoin donations, right? I see that that was just
Yes.
asked.
Yes. Sadly, we received, I think, a Bitcoin like 7 years ago, but then cashed it out immediately. But we should have just kept it as a Bitcoin. Silly.
Bitcoin is just skyrocketed, by the way, because the feds confiscated a large portion of it. I was an early investor, but not that big. So
Wow.
buy and hold.
Alex, I see that you were saying something.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was just saying I feel that pain. I felt really smart selling a lot of Bitcoin at $100.
Nice.
But yeah, overall, thank you for a great, discussion.
Thank
I
you
was going to
so
say
much.
presentation, but it has been more of a discussion. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Great.
And to close out, hey, should I email is the best way to communicate with you? Just to email. I have both your email and I believe I have Mira's as well. To send you some ideas.
Yeah.
Yep, that sounds great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Well, then I think we can call it a night. My ride is here. So thank you so much for joining us on this experimental call. I think it went really well. We will be following up over email to say thank you. And yes, thank you so
One
much.
final
Have a
thing,
wonderful night.
You,
Oh, yes.
Few people have asked. A recording will be available. We'll be posting a recording on YouTube, and a few people have asked about slides, so maybe we can attach the slides in some capacity. But a recording will definitely be available.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mira. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much.